Okay. Oh, I got a story to tell you.
Tell me the story.
Okay. So
Yes.
so awesome. Okay.
Yes.
So running home.
Running- okay.
Got home. Went to computers. Working hard. Then sleeping. Sleeping lots.
Yeah.
Doing some homework. Jumping jacks.
Jumping jacks.
Jumping
Okay, wait.
jacks!
Okay, so
Dude, that's my favorite part of the story.
jumping jacks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, but so I have a question for you.
Yes.
You told me the story, but I feel like it's incomplete because
What? My
we're
story's
missing the subject.
But
Sentence fragment. Okay, excellent. So I just want to tell you this story, this funny thing that happened the other night.
okay, I'm so excited.
Yes.
Okay.
So
Yes.
picture,
Ooh.
scene, Italian restaurant, pretty girl. Food, hot, cold,
Oh.
angry,
Oh.
angry,
Hmm.
yelling,
Oh.
crying, sad, home, alone, sleep.
You know what would make this story a little bit better?
What?
Well, if it had sentences.
Oh.
But most importantly,
Yes,
some verbs.
verbs. That's a great point.
Because I know it's about you and like a restaurant.
Yeah.
And eating, but I'm not really sure.
So the message is lesson number 2, sentence fragments, add verbs.
All right, good afternoon, students. We're going to be looking today at sentence fragments. So sometimes when you're writing, do you ever get that feeling like something's kind of missing? Like maybe the sentence I just wrote doesn't make any sense or it's not complete? Well, if that's the case, maybe you're looking at a sentence fragment as opposed to a full sentence. So we'll be investigating that today. The overview of the lesson for today. Well, we're going to be investigating 2 types of sentence fragments. The first we're going to call the missing piece fragment. So, missing piece fragment. And then the second, in addition to the missing piece fragment, we're going to be looking at a dependent clause fragment. I apologize for the not quite straight line. This lesson is going to include 4 practice activities and 1 short homework quiz. So if you're at the end of the lesson and you haven't completed 4 activities, you're probably not done. Kinds of fragments you should watch out for: the missing piece fragment and the dependent clause fragment. Sometimes a group of words is punctuated as a sentence, but is missing one or more of the essential parts of a sentence: the subject and verb. Here are some examples. 1. An award for creativity. This is the first example. But the question is, who or what won an award? The sentence doesn't tell you. The subject is missing. The second type of fragment is one in which the verb is missing. So here's an example. The hamster under the bed. The sentence doesn't tell you what the hamster was or did. The verb is missing. Finding fragments like these in your work when you're revising is the hard part. Fixing them is pretty easy. There are 2 ways to correct sentence fragments. Here's the first one. To change a missing piece fragment into a complete sentence, add whatever is missing: a subject, a verb, or both. You may need to add a subject. Her essay won the award for creativity. This is an example of a sentence fragment that, without the subject, would be an incomplete sentence. Her essay, in this case, is the subject. In some cases, you may need to add a verb. The hamster was under the bed. So this is a linking verb. Without was, the hamster under the bed would be a sentence fragment, as is the second case with this sentence. The hamster under the bed chewed my shoelaces. In this case, this is an action verb. Without the word chewed, we wouldn't know what the hamster was doing. You may need to add both a subject and a verb in order to create a complete sentence. Here's an example. Many desk-bound workers enjoy running in the park during their lunch break. In this case, we have workers, which is the subject, and enjoyed, which is the verb. Or there's times also where you may need to add a helping verb. The team was missing 2 of its best players. This is an example of adding a helping verb. This brings us to our first exercise for today. In the following examples, you will see sentences that could be either full sentences or fragments. You're going to be asked to identify whether it is a complete sentence or a fragment, and then you will be asked to fix it. Following your answering of these questions, I will go over the answers and responses. Let's go over some of these answers together. Question number 1. Happy to hear from you. This is an example of a fragment because it's missing the subject. Who's happy to hear from you? The second question, consider the alternatives. This would be an S because it is a complete sentence. About today's meeting would be an F because it is a fragment. Question number 4, after driving for 3 days is also a fragment. Number 5, cornered the dog attacked is a complete sentence because we have both the subject and the verb. Number 6, on the way to Yellowknife. Who's on the way to Yellowknife? We don't know. It's missing a subject, so therefore it's a fragment. Number 7, worn down by the constant bickering in the office and hostile attitudes of our managers. We're still left asking the question, who was worn down? It's missing a subject, therefore it's a fragment. She quit. Here we have a complete sentence. It's a short sentence, but it's still a sentence. Number 9, it was no problem would be a complete sentence. However, the sentence is a fragment because number 9 just says no problem. Therefore, this is a fragment. Lastly, number 10, the computer with the large screen monitor on the desk closet to the window. This is an example of a fragment. The computer with the large screen monitor on the desk closet to the window, what was it doing? We don't know. It's missing a verb. Some of you may be wondering why question number 2, consider the alternatives, is a complete sentence. In this case, it's one of those rare kind of examples in English where there's rules that apply that are a little bit confusing. So in number 2, consider the alternatives. This is more kind of like a command. So it's almost inferred that consider the alternatives is spoken towards you. So even though it's not directly stated, consider the alternatives, the subject would be for you to do it. I know this is a little bit confusing, but take my word for it. Number 2 is a complete sentence. In order to be more familiar with how to correct sentence fragments, we're going to do another exercise now. Similar to the last activity, you'll be asked to identify whether or not each example is a complete sentence or just a series of fragments. We will go over the answers together afterwards. Let's go through some of these answers together. Number 1, we decided to walk downtown to the coffee shop where we both ordered tea, just to be different. In this particular question, number 1 is a fragment. We're going to go over some of the ways to correct this in the next exercise, but for the time being, we're just recording whether this is a fragment or it's a series of complete sentences. Number 2, my husband says I treat him like a god, every meal a burnt offering. This is an example also of a fragment. Number 3, we went to the movie last night. It was a comedy about a man who lived for 9 months in an airport terminal. Not very funny, in my opinion. If you think this is a fragment, you got it right. Number 4, I don't like to drink coffee in the morning. If I do, I toss and turn all day. It's true. This is a complete sentence or a series of sentences. So if you didn't see anything wrong with it, you're right. Number 5, Finally managed to get all my homework done. By then, it was after midnight. Everyone else was asleep. This is an example of a fragment. Number 6. The difference between an amateur musician and a savings bond? Someday the bond will mature and make money. This is an example of a fragment. Number 7. Answer the phone. May be the call I have been waiting for about my job application. I hope so. Well, I hope you don't write like that because you'll definitely not get the job. Number 7 is a fragment. All right, ladies and gentlemen, so just as a kind of reminder, any group of words containing a subject and a verb is a clause. So we're going to be looking at independent clauses and dependent clauses. Dependent clauses are incomplete sentences because they are reliant on something. So we're going to be looking at that today. So first off, independent clauses are examples of full sentences. So an independent clause is one that makes complete sense on its own. It can stand alone as a sentence. Here's an example. I am a hopeless speller. This is an independent clause. It is complete in and of itself. So those are good. Dependent clauses, however, as the name implies, dependent clauses cannot stand alone as a sentence. It depends on another sentence to make it complete. So, because I am a hopeless speller. This example is an incomplete sentence. It is dependent on something else to complete it. So, this is kind of a sentence fragment. So, as we correct this fragment, we can do so by attaching it to an independent clause. So again, taking a look here, because I'm a hopeless speller, this is our dependent clause. Now what we're going to do is we're going to attach it, in this case using a comma, we're going to use a comma and then attach it to a independent clause. So I have chained a dictionary to my wrist. This is an example of a complete sentence. So because I am a hopeless speller, dependent clause, I have chained a dictionary to my wrist. Now this is a complete sentence. Okay, so we've attached, in this case, our dependent clause right here to our independent clause, making it whole. So as we kind of look for dependent clauses, here are some clues that can kind of help us. So dependent clauses, also known as subordinate clauses, begin with words such as after, that, although, though, as if, unless, as soon as, whatever, and so on and so forth. You can read through this list on your own. So these are some clues right here that will really help us kind of identify sentences that may be dependent clauses, or incomplete sentences rather, that are dependent clauses, or also known as fragments. So these are not complete sentences. Okay, so watch out for these. You can use these to kind of guide you as we kind of do some activities. This brings us to our next activity or exercise, and this is for you to identify whether or not this is a fragment or a sentence. So numbers 1 through 8 will be a series of such examples, and you need to identify whether it's a fragment or a sentence. And here are the answers. Okay, so 1 is a fragment, 2 is a fragment, 3 is a fragment, 4 is a fragment, 5 is a complete sentence, F is a fragment, or 6 is a fragment, 7 is a fragment, and 8 is a complete sentence. Here's some tips. To correct a dependent fragment, or dependent clause fragment rather, join it either with a sentence that comes before or one that comes after it, whichever linkage makes the most sense. So you'll be discerning in this, and you'll attach it either before or after the independent clause. Here's an example. So here's a problem that we're going to solve. Here's a sentence that has a dependent clause kind of located in it. We want to move into our new apartment as soon as the current tenants leave. It's perfect for our family. Okay, so there's, in this example, there is a dependent clause hidden in it. You'll know this because there's a big red X, meaning wrong. So what's wrong? Well, the second sentence is incomplete. The dependent clause, Q, is as soon as. which kind of identifies it as a sentence fragment. You could join the fragment to the sentence that follows it, but then you would get, as soon as the current tenants leave, it's perfect for our family, which doesn't make any sense either. Okay, so let's revise that previous example and make it correct. You can pause it here and correct it yourself, and we'll check the revision in just a second. So here's the revision. This is the completed, corrected sentence, or a series of sentences that make sense. We want to move into our new apartment as soon as the current tenants leave. It's perfect for our family. So in this case, we didn't mark it with a comma, but we've just attached it to an independent clause. So we want to move into our new apartment as soon as the current tenants leave. It's perfect for our family. So this is a correct revision. So we've taken what was as soon as the current tenants leave, which is a dependent clause, and attached it to an independent clause. All right, here is a kind of the last of the practice exercises. Before the homework. So practice exercise and then homework. The items in exercise 7.8 contain one or more dependent clauses masquerading as sentences. Masquerading, for those of you who don't know, just means like kind of hiding or faking their way. So these are dependent clauses and therefore not complete sentences. So watch out. They are in fact sentence fragments. So what I'd like you to do right now is underline the dependent clauses in each of the items. Okay, so you're going to flip to this exercise right here and work your way through these 5 examples. Okay, so pause the video here and work on underlining the dependent clauses in each of these examples. And here are the answers. So check through your work to make sure that you have gotten all the correct answers. And you can do this now. And when you're done, that brings us to the end. Well done.